It's the middle of the night here, 2 o'clock a.m. I've had about 3 hours sleep, as I'm just too keyed up right now. So, I'll get naps later on. No big deal. For the last 3 days, I have been pumping out emails directing people to my article, my paper on Charles Dickens and A Christmas Carol, using three different emails because one of them got blocked for spamming, and I was worried about the other two, so I used three different ones. I sent to, maybe 600 scholars, English and literature scholars across the world, English-speaking scholars. I would say 500 of them got through. There was a few other people, a few journalists, journalism teachers and journalists. I've got my stats here to give you an idea of the result. I also posted on a Facebook group about A Christmas Carol, so that's added into the mix. The total visitors on Academia EDU, because I'm on their paid tier now, I got a half price off deal, so I can see very specific stats now. Total visitors was 97 over these 3 days. The total document, that's unique visitors. The total document views means the total number of my papers, mostly the one about Dickens, but not exclusively, was 147. Now, that sounds pretty good, but if you break it down, there's only 6 people that read all or nearly all of this 49-page paper out of all of those. There were 15 who read maybe half, say 10 pages or more, up to 30 or so, so like between 10 and 30, who read, and then they got either tired or, disgusted, or who knows. That was 15 people. As far as email responses are concerned, I got 2 that were just polite and studiously non-committal, I would say, just polite. I got 1 that was sarcastic, who said I should be writing to journalists, and I wrote back naively or pseudo-naively and told him, thank you for your suggestion. I've been doing that, and if you have any suggestions of anybody I should write to, please let me know. And of course, I didn't hear from him because he was being sarcastic. And I got 2 or 3 that were sincerely interested and said thank you, and I look forward to reading it, and so on. So, that could be one of the 6 people that actually did read it. There were a couple prominent, or I would say prominent people whom I won't name, who did write back and were very sympathetic. One of them didn't have time. One of them, this was a nationally known psychic who ended up thinking that maybe she might have me on her podcast. I won't name that person. One of the people who was the most approachable was an English lord. I guess he's Sir someone, so I assume he's actual aristocracy. And he was very approachable and very down to earth, which I thought was kind of interesting. So that's what we have so far. Now, admittedly, this is on a weekend. Of the people in the Facebook group, I would say that they were an awful lot of the people that read 1 or 2 pages. They didn't read the paper, but they kind of poked into it a little bit, enough to be, frightened or disgusted. You don't know. One person posted about it, and she was just flat out in denial. And she said she read it, and when I asked her, well, how many pages did you read? Then she went off on some other tangent because she didn't want to answer that question. There are quite a number of the people that I wrote to were real Dickens scholars. The rest of them were people who were interested in Victorian literature of the 19th century or British 19th century literature or things like that. There were also a number of people who were scholars of American Victorian literature, and I made the case to them that because it was written, as I have determined, by an American couple, it was actually American literature. Well, I don't think that went over with any of them, but they will get a letter about my next paper anyway, about Edgar Allan Poe, so we'll see about that. And for the matter of that, I have been fine-tuning the next paper, which proves beyond any shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, many times over, that Edgar Allan Poe falsely claimed The Raven when it came out, and it was actually written by Matthew Franklin Whittier in honor of and in tortured grief over his late wife, Abby, who was his co-author on the original of A Christmas Carol. Now, and that article is even better, or even, I think they're both well written, but it's even stronger. The evidence for that is just flat out knock your socks off definite. I understand how outrageous these things are. What it calls to my mind is the fact that most people, the vast majority, cannot believe in anything unless an authority has signed off on it. Their grasp of reality is that tentative that they abdicate it to an authority. It's just a matter of which authority they pick. Then there are a smaller group of people, or is a smaller group of people, who have gotten outside the box one way or another, either by insanity or by drugs or by intellectual study. And not just from one lifetime, I would think. I think it happens over more than one lifetime. But these people have gotten outside the box. However, they don't have their moorings yet outside the box. So therefore, they're wild, They'll believe any kind of wild thing. They're subject to delusions of various kinds. And I don't like the word conspiracy, the term conspiracy theories, because anything that's a scam that was agreed upon by one or more persons is by definition a conspiracy theory, just like anything that's flying up in the sky that you haven't figured out what it is a UFO. So it's a misleading term. But given that, using the colloquial meaning, people who have gotten outside the box are subject to all kinds of conspiracy theories without fact-checking them. Then there are some people who have put these two things together, and this is the transcendent process where you go all out on one extreme, and then you go all out in reaction on the other extreme. And then neither one of those are satisfying. So eventually you find some transcendent merging of the two. And that's because as above, so below, which means that these disparate, separate, polar opposites actually came from a unified source in the first place. So you're finding them in a more unified strata. Makes sense, doesn't it? I think that Hegel turned that into the Hegelian dialectic, but he didn't invent that. Like so many things in the West we're proud of, he didn't invent it. So you have these two extremes. You have people on this lower level who are looking for the truth, looking to anchor themselves in the truth, looking for that pole star. That's a good search. Nothing wrong with that. But they're looking for it down here, looking for love in all the wrong places. These people are looking for their anchor of truth in scripture, in science, in governmental authorities, in any kind of authority. They're looking for that pole star. People rebel against that because there's certain inherent problems with it being down here. And they go to the opposite extreme where they're outside the box, but they're still down here. So that's a problem because you go nuts, see? You're subject to all of these conspiracy theories. You're just unanchored, loose cannon, So that's no good either. So people bounce back and forth between these two. Finally, they get tired of that. It's worn out. And they say, how can I find both of these things at some level that doesn't have these drawbacks? Okay. So they look for a pole star that's reliable. Right? That's transcendent because reality comes from the top down. Therefore, if you want to find a real pole star or a more real pole star, and you still want to be outside the box, you got to go up here. But the person up here is invisible, which is to say his being there is invisible to the people here. That means that they assign him to one of these two opposites, polar opposites down here. That means that the person who has found the pole star out of the box up here is viewed by I forget which side is which, is viewed by this fellow, the orthodoxy, as a loose cannon. But he's viewed by the loose cannons as orthodoxy over here. So I'm drawing my diagram in the air. Okay, so neither one of these polar opposites on this level can perceive this person up here. Therefore, that person up here is extremely unpopular because he's invisible. Where he's visible, to the extent he's visible, he is viewed by the orthodoxy as a wild loose cannon. He is viewed by the wild loose cannons as orthodoxy. That means that this person is vilified by everybody because he's not understood by any of them until they get here themselves, and that takes lifetimes. So this is an ignorant age. And in this age, someone who is ahead of their time, which is to say here, and I'm not saying this is the pinnacle because there's, way beyond that, okay? But this is just the next step. People who are up here cannot be perceived by those people here, which is the world, the vast majority of people. Therefore, you get statistics like this. You get 6 people out of over 500 who read the whole article because they understand this is real. You get 15 people who read into it, but they can't get past it. So they drop out. At some point, they can't stand it anymore, or they're bored. I don't know which. And everybody else reads 1 or 2 pages so that they can say that they read it, and they're out of there. So this is about what I could expect, except that this is very strong evidence. This article is extremely well written, and it has knock your socks off evidence in it. And the Poe article is even more radical, even stronger. So what happens? Typically, what happens is either they get rid of the guy who's a gadfly, which hopefully won't happen to me, becomes a martyr. And then what he said, they have to do damage control on. So the people in the orthodoxy have to either assimilate the part of it that they can't get rid of and reject the rest, or they have to completely recast this person as a loose cannon so that everything he said is discounted. While the loose cannons have to characterize this person as the orthodoxy, I guess, or just ignore him. Because here's the thing, for the loose cannons, to them, he's just one of a million. Okay, well, he's got a wild theory. Well, I've got a cooler wild theory. So the guy with the cooler wild theory gets 50 times more attention than the guy with the real cool theory. See? In other words, I'm not making this up. This is real. In order to be as sexy with something real as the guy who's using his imagination, you got to have some pretty incredible stuff to compete with the guy that's cheating, basically, because you know that the cheater can win over the guy that's not cheating, easily, So in order to compete with the people who are going off wild in their imagination with the sexiness of my presentation, it has to be pretty strong. Well, it is strong, but I don't think it's that interesting. And I think it's not that popular. I mean, I'm not sure why it's not that popular, but I think it scares people because deep down they know this is real and my stuff is imagination. On some level, I think they know that, and people who, are going for all kinds of sexy looking, imaginative things, they also feel it, and they don't like it. It's an uncomfortable thing when somebody's going down a rabbit hole and it's a real rabbit hole and not a fun one. This, I think, to ramble on a little bit more, is what the documentary filmmakers have figured out. And I don't mean the serious ones, but I mean the popular entertainment ones. They had figured out a formula, and I realized this when I was shopping my own documentary around. It didn't fit. And the reason it didn't fit is the formula is you scare the pants off people and then you reassure them. So you look at, here's this reincarnation thing. Here's these cases. They look pretty real, but quick, let's rescue the viewer and bring in the skeptic who dismisses the whole thing, explains it away, however irrationally. See, it doesn't matter if he's irrational or not, because he rescues us by explaining it away. And so that it becomes a carnival ride, a joy ride. Oh, we get scared like a horror film. And this is like documentaries in the horror film genre. Oh, these cases look pretty real. Oh, he's explained it away, thank God. And then the show ends, we don't know. That's always the official thing. Well, we can't know for sure in the scary music and the credits, Well, my documentary, In Another Life, Reincarnation in America, said this is real, this is why it's real, and this is how people are encountering it. And I have one skeptic that was like the fall guy, whom I used to poke a hole through what the skeptics are actually doing and what they're made of. So my show is totally different, released back in 2003. You're seeing a little bit more of that now. The formula is being used a little bit less. So I don't know how long this will take to get out, but I do know that the soup is spit in, and basically the entire English-speaking academic world of literature and English and literary history, has been put on notice, that Charles Dickens was not the author of A Christmas Carol, that this is a scam, and that the real authors were, again, they were neither secular, imagining it all, nor were they traditional Christians. They were esoteric Christians. They were what the Orthodoxy considers heretics. And I wrote a priest to this effect. And I warned him. I said, look, this paper concerns reincarnation. You should know before you think about reading it. I didn't hear back from him. But I told him that A Christmas Carol desperately needs to be taken away from Charles Dickens, because Charles Dickens is being revealed increasingly as a scoundrel. See? And I told him that if people believe that a scoundrel could come up with A Christmas Carol inside of 6 weeks as an imaginative, hypocritical exercise, intellectual exercise, then the whole idea, all of the respect for real inspired literature goes down the tubes, because people imagine there really is no intrinsic morality. There really is no such thing as inspiration, because any, I don't know how to put it, any scoundrel could use his imagination when he's afraid of going into debt and come up with what appears to be a spiritually inspired classic that inspires the whole world. Well, it's utter nonsense. It couldn't possibly be, But if the real authors are revealed, traditional Christianity realizes that this work, which moved the world, was not written by traditional Christians. It was written by people they have for centuries considered heretics and persecuted, which is to say the esoteric Christians, the real ones. Okay, so, there you have it. This is the weekend. An awful lot of this material was sent out on a weekend. These people are scholars. They're, professional teachers. They may not have accessed their email yet in the office. Also, they haven't shared it among their colleagues, because I'm having to guess that I've set, the grapevine afire with this, whether they'll believe it or not, or agree with it or not, because the thing is they all have to get together and figure out some strategy for damage control. Doesn't mean they, are going to embrace it, but they know it's a threat. See? So they're going to have to communicate with each other. So that means there's going to be a buzz out there, and there's going to be people looking at this document without reading all of it, just to see what it is. So that's the people that show up on Academia EDU with 1, 2, 3 page views. See? So it's going to have an effect, but a ripple effect. But what exactly that effect is, I don't know. Now, I don't have to cite stats here on this YouTube channel because you can see them for yourself. You see that, I start out with maybe 5 or 6 views on these, and sometimes it can go up to as high as 33. Generally, it doesn't top about 18 or so. And not all of these people, not all of you watching are sympathetic. I know that. That's a very small number. I mean, you look at YouTube channels, to have 18 to 33 as your top, that's the most that you ever get on any particular entry. And with me presenting some pretty radical stuff in this video blog, some pretty interesting, pretty radical stuff if you're receptive to it. And that's all I can get, So it's pretty interesting. I will continue to report on this. It's now 21 minutes after 2 in the morning. I'm just so keyed up because when you work all day sending out, and I personalize these. So in a lot of them, I had a template, but in an awful lot of them, I took the personalized paragraph and ran with it. So I wrote individual emails to maybe 100 people, basically. So much so, like I said, that one of my email services shut me down twice. I had to move to another one. Of course, a lot of them bounced, for whatever reason. What I did find was kind of interesting. One more thing, and then I'll sign off here. In academia, any email that comes to a professor that is outside the university is automatically marked as spam in capital letters. So talk about the ivory tower, they're so ingrown that anything outside that university is spam by definition. I guess that means that they have a personal email and they have a university email, and the only people that normally use their university email is within the system, I don't know what their colleagues use. I guess their colleagues don't use their university email address. So automatic spam. Nonetheless, some of these people looked at it and some of them answered. And when they answer, it says in the return, it says spam in big letters with stars next to it. So I am now a spammer, but everything is motive. This is what AI doesn't understand. See, artificial intelligence or machine intelligence has no conception of morality. It has no conception of civil disobedience. All it knows is, are you following the rule or are you not following the rule? Very dangerous, I won't get off on that topic. So that's enough for this morning. I will say today, technically. And I'm going to, I guess I still have some people to notify in the Academia EDU system. So I think I'll do a little bit of that and at some point get some breakfast and then take a nap later. One thing I've noticed, by the way, is I really do have kind of a problem when I'm sleep deprived of just misspeaking. Like the last entry, I'm sure you figured out that Jesus was actually born in a manger and not in an inn. I caught that one too late and I wasn't going to repost the entire thing, for that. So I figured, well, they'll figure it out, egg on my face, I said something dumb. Who knows what I've said in this one, because like I said, I've only had 3 hours sleep. But it reminds me, it's kind of the Yogi Berra syndrome. And I did find on YouTube, somebody has posted a bunch of his sayings, the wisdom of Yogi Berra. He missed my favorite one, though, was ships crashing in the night. So literally, you who may be watching this, we are ships crashing in the night, especially if you don't agree with me. And with that, I will sign off and I'll report later on when I have more to say.